And we are live. All right. So I did this today a little bit later than the usual live stream. For me, I think 3 p.m. works a little bit better my time than 2:30 p.m. So we'll see. I know this probably then means it works better or worse for some of you guys. So thank you for sticking around for the 3 o'clock time for those of you who are live in the chat. And we have a lot of exciting stuff to talk about today, and we'll see. You know, I think this will probably be the new time, but we'll give it a shot. Hello, Keenan. Hello, James. Hello, William. Good afternoon. Good afternoon from Texas. Frederick. Nice to see you guys here. Garance, nice to see you. Saul as well. Yes. Yeah, it's been kind of a weird weather week for this area, but kind of not too surprising, I feel like, for this time of year. All right. So we had an Apple event this week, which is always fun and exciting. And as with a lot of Apple events, there's sort of the main thing around whatever Apple introduced, but then there's also the different bits and pieces that come out from that that I think have some interesting anecdotes that are worth talking about. And there's also been a fair amount of smart home news this week, including a video I had on my channel, and a handful of other creators have talked about this as well. The new Aara M3 Hub, which was a big item from CES. It came out, and I think there's maybe some more context around that announcement we can talk about here on the live stream. So before we get into too much of that, I recently reviewed the SmartWings shades on my channel, and in that I talked about how Lutron Serena shades, which I've also reviewed on my channel, is sort of like the, you know, high-end, really nice option for your for smart shades in your home. And they have a sale going on right now through May 31st in I think it's in, just the U.S. and Canada, excluding Quebec. And these are just their terms of the sale that they sent me, so don't blame me for those details. But that it's if you use the serial number on the Caseta wireless hub that you might already have with Caseta wireless light switches, then you can get $100 off up to 3 shades. So $100 per shade off through May 31st. You know, Lutron doesn't have a ton of sales all the time. This one's pretty good if you're in the market for those kind of shades. Something to consider. And you know, I'd say start thinking about it now, because buying smart shades is not a fast process. You want to measure, you want to get some samples, you want to check and make sure what you're getting is what you want in your space. And so starting that process now, you have, you know, a few weeks to figure that out. Or if you're trying to do it on May 29th, you might be hard pressed to get it to slip in by the end of May. So then some other tidbits from Apple's Let Loose event that came out. I was talking about that earlier. I'm going to pull up this one, which this was linked to by John Gruber on Daring Fireball. I wasn't familiar with this blog before that, but it's saying that Apple did film. It seems the you know, their speculation is that they filmed this on with iPhone, but if you notice some of the shots in the keynote, there was a lot of background blur. And so, you know, I don't really talk much about audio visual stuff on my channel, but I just thought this was interesting from the fact of iPhone still being a camera, you know, that Apple uses for these kinds of things, but that they used they used a Panavision lens relay system. And, you know, you can see all this nice background blur, but it's quite the rig on an iPhone to get it to look like this. So this is what that kind of deal looks like. You know, you can barely see the iPhone in that kind of a setup. One of the other things, by the way, that always amazes me about Apple events in terms of audio is that they always have, or not always, but Tim Cook is often talking in this kind of a setting where he's in Apple Park and they have a hard ceiling, glass, and a stone or marble, whatever floor. And there's zero reverb in the recording. They must do some magic in post-production plus like loads of sound blankets or something else, some really high-end microphones. Because, it doesn't look like he's wearing a lapel. I'm guessing he's boomed from above, but to mic someone in that kind of a boomy environment, with that little reverb is really impressive. And there's been plenty of videos of, people from WWDC videos to Apple executive interviews to Tim Cook at these events where they're talking in this kind of a setting inside Apple Park, and there's, little to no reverb in their audio. And so whatever they're doing there is pretty amazing. Then I guess, so the big news with the event was, of course, the new iPads coming out. There was a lot of discussion about Apple's iPad commercial where they were squishing all those different things and trying to show that it came into iPad. I kind of cringed when I saw that commercial initially in the event. I'm not surprised they came out and apologized for it, but we'll see what comes of that. Speaking of apologizing, we have Brilliant, the smart home company. They shut down. So hopefully they can find a buyer to keep their systems running. I haven't heard, this story was published earlier this week. I haven't heard any updates on if they found anybody to buy them. But I've reviewed this Brilliant panel on my channel. It was last year. And they have all these different touch screen control panels, as well as switches that replace your light switches in the wall that are just switches. And they integrate with lots of other smart home equipment. So you can add in various camera systems into here. So you could see your doorbell from here on the Brilliant display. I have it control my Sonos speakers and my Philips Hue lights. But they charged a high price upfront for their products and didn't really have any kind of ongoing sources of revenue for people using their products, and their services are cloud-based. And, probably just due to lack of new sales, but I feel like maybe also lack of subscription revenue, they ran out of money. And so they are shutting down as a company, but still keeping the services on for the time being. But there could be a chance if you have Brilliant stuff, like I do. I have a Brilliant display in my kitchen that they sent me last year. I haven't bought any other stuff from them, but it will stop working if they shut their servers down. So, it's sad to see a smart home company go like this. I feel like they were, by not having recurring payments from their users, that's one thing that's sort of a downside or not a downside. Well, a tricky thing for them, for their business, right? If they don't have new money coming in from their existing customers and they're kind of a niche product as it is, that it's kind of hard to have ongoing costs for your product. And so we'll see what happens. But I also think it's kind of a tough position where they were trying to be a control that integrated with a lot of other systems. And there's a lot of companies trying to do this, especially with Matter these days. And I don't really know if it's something that is realistic, aside from plugging into like a smart home ecosystem. Like, if you're controlling things via, let's say, Apple Home, and the user puts all their stuff in Apple Home or Amazon or Google, the Brilliant can talk to Amazon and Google, and and it had integrations with like Philips Hue and Sonos. But I just don't know, in this sort of world of walled gardens and big tech companies trying to control more things, if there's a viable business model for someone who's just trying to connect all of those dots. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Certainly, there are folks with Home Assistant hoping to make that more of a thing like that. There's Homey Pro. Brilliant was one of those sort of companies, although, again, a little bit different idea, a little bit more maybe general consumer facing than something like Home Assistant. And Home Assistant, of course, is open source and more or less free right now, aside from buying their own boxes. But I hope that these kinds of businesses can continue to exist, and I hope that Brilliant finds a buyer. But I don't know. It might not be realistic for someone to think that they can take on something so audacious as to be a smart home platform. I don't know what you guys think about it in the comments. Oh yeah. The back to the crushing video, assumed it was CGI. Didn't bother me much. Yeah, I actually don't think it was CGI. I think Apple tends to do a lot of practical, meaning like actual things in their videos, and I think that was real. Yeah, William, I think we covered that. Basically, I think I didn't like the ad. I didn't like sort of what it implied. I mean, I love the fact that when you get an iPad, you can do lots of things with it, and I think that's what they're trying to show, but didn't really happen. Yeah, and Frederick, that's a good point. You basically have to be an existing customer of Lutron to get that deal, going back to the beginning. It's, from my understanding, it's the same Caseta wireless hub, Frederick, as you might have for light switches. So you don't need a special hub for Serena shades. So if you have a hub already, that should be good. Okay, so George is saying that 30 days of support for Brilliant, and then it's over. Cool. I haven't seen your short about that, but that makes sense. You got contacted by someone, and I should have reached out to my contact there. It's been a busy week, and I haven't had a chance to. I don't even know. Maybe they wouldn't respond to my email at this point. Yeah. Some of their stuff, though, yeah, it's right, James. Like, Brilliant stuff was on the higher end for sure. I think they're trying to find that happy medium between being something that's more oriented towards consumers and something that's more high end. You have companies like Control 4 that are very high end, and like you can't buy their stuff unless you get it through an installer who's professionally setting up your home with that stuff. And then, Brilliant, it seemed like was kind of trying to be a little bit in between those two. But mostly, yeah, it is sad about the employees losing their job. That is not fun to see and not good. Okay, cool, Frederick. Yes, Miguel, we will get to that question in a minute. I do want to about iOS 18. But coming back to something else that happened this week that is kind of along the lines of like Brilliant was trying to be their own smart home platform, and kind of had some struggles there. At least, it didn't work out for them in terms of a business case. But Aara is a company that launched their M3 Hub this week. And I find it an interesting hub in that really the benefit of this hub is if you're trying to use more Aara devices. And, Aara as a smart home company is, and if you're trying to use more Aara devices with their app and their automation, and their tools to run your automation. And it makes sense as Aara is growing as a smart home company. What if one of their customers wants more Aara stuff? And you can already run their automations on many of their other hubs and use their app to do so. And so why not make a high-end device or very future thinking device that's targeted at that use case. So I don't think, and they do talk about, and they talked about this a lot at CES about how a lot of it is local control oriented. And they're really thinking about user privacy in a lot of this. So I think that there's a lot of good thought going into this product from Aara, and it's a well-intentioned product, and it does have a lot of cool features. But that said, for someone like myself who tends to rely mostly on Apple Home to run things, I just didn't see it really as worth the upgrade. And that's more or less what I said in the video. There's some more nuance, which you can go watch the video if you haven't seen it already. But I think it's a good product, but it's generally not for me. Aside from Aara sent me one, I do love Power over Ethernet, and so I'll probably just keep using it because I like that I can run this with Power over Ethernet, and I like that it has a thread radio if I want to take advantage of that later. So depending on the cost difference to you and what that means, maybe it does still make sense to get it. But it's just, and here they link to their Amazon.co.uk website for the from the U.S. store, which is not good. But it's linked to the U.S. store in my description of my video. But yeah, I don't think it's worth the upgrade for most people unless you really love some of those unique features and see where it would make sense for you. But going back to the Apple event and iOS 18 and beyond, kind of thinking about what's coming up next. I saw some questions in the chat that I want to get back to. Yeah, I think we already talked about the iPad crushing it. Let's see. This one. Yeah, iOS 18, will it add vacuum support in appliances? I mean, back to one of the other themes coming out of this week is that for those of us, and I'm sort of in this camp, I am not really, but Apple has made it clear that they are not really doing much to update the iPad mini. And iPad mini, at least based on their external actions, is not really a priority for Apple. Of course, there are people who still want to buy it. They'll continue to sell it. And my children share one that used to be mine that they sort of use, and it works great. I have no complaints about the iPad mini, but it's clear that the iPad mini is not at the front of Apple's mind of all the different things that the company is working on and focusing on. What are they actually prioritizing, and what are they actually driving forward with new features and new technology, and what's getting their the smartest people at Apple's attention, right? Because engineering resources even at a company of Apple scale, the top engineering resources, the most familiar people most familiar with everything about Apple inside the company and how to build their new products and make them that much better. Those people come at a premium and are not always, they're not available to do everything. That's not an unlimited resource. So where are those smart people being focused on? And clearly, I think it's probably not the iPad mini. And I think to the same degree, the question is always in the back of my head of how much does Apple actually focus on smart home tech? Mark Gurman has talked about that they have a building that sort of has a fake home where they can test some of these products and test out scenarios with their software. And they have a team dedicated to HomeKit and Apple Home, it seems. But, we saw 2 years ago a complete redesign of the Home app. I think it's better in some ways. It's arguably worse in other ways. They revised a little bit of that design last year. And they've continued to support Matter. They've been involved with they were involved with the formation of Matter and open sourced a lot of Apple Home code HomeKit code at the time of Matter sort of getting started. And you can see sort of the parallels in Matter to Apple Home. Things like where you scan a code to sort of start an encrypted communication between the device and your phone or whatever device and the actual product. And so I think Matter is, but at the same time, then Matter is being pushed forward by the group and adding things like vacuums. And I think it'll be really interesting to see what does Apple do or not do about things like vacuums this year. So we've had some of the first robot vacuums that will be compatible with the Matter standard hit the market, and some of those software updates are rolling out. But and it would be nice to be able to control those with Matter. And of course, SwitchBot has kind of circumvented the whole thing by enabling their vacuum to show up as basically a light switch. But I think they're doing some clever things there. So maybe there's some ways that vacuum manufacturers can get around it regardless of what Apple does for support. But I'm very keen on this year at WWDC seeing if Apple adds support for vacuums and other accessories like, maybe even some appliances or things in iOS 18. So we'll see. That was kind of a long-winded roundabout way that I see this as one of the key indicators this year of how much does Apple actually care about smart home tech. Maybe the vacuum thing caught them off guard and they have other cool things planned. And I think it would be clear to all of us if they release a bunch of stuff at WWDC or shortly after that, that's all really cool smart home tech and don't address this vacuum issue. It's not like then they don't care about Apple's smart home tech, but it's sort of, if they don't do anything with the vacuum front or anything else, then it just makes me a little concerned that maybe it's falling to the back of the company's attention. Always a thing to keep an eye on with Apple with whatever technology, because there are things that they pay more attention to than others at various times. Understandably so. I don't blame them for that. They have to prioritize. Let's see. There was some other, I want to get to some more questions, but I think we also had a couple other topics to get to. Yes, speaking of things where other companies are innovating, let me pull up this tab here. This is a little bit of an old article. I don't think we talked about this last week. This is a little bit of an older article, but I saw it recently and it brought to mind. I was like, I'm going to mark this as something to talk about on the live stream, which is just that Simply Safe is rolling out this face detection with AI, where they're live agents, and it can use AI to recognize faces and recognize unusual patterns of people visiting the home. And you can add people here, friends or family or regular visitors to your home. Maybe you have someone coming to take care of something or fix something in your home on a regular basis, and you could add them in there. But I think this kind of combination of on-device image recognition with machine learning and potentially some more elaborate things in the cloud with AI, I think that's really going to be the future of a lot of video platforms. Now, I haven't tried Simply Safe stuff. In this case, I don't really plan on fitting this in my review schedule, but I just think I wanted to mention this because I think this is sort of a feature of modern video platforms that I would like to see in the future. And I think makes a lot of sense, because one of the challenges of, I've been noticing my Ecobee doorbells getting a little bit slower in actually picking up people that are coming to the door, and restarting that seemed to, can help that a little bit sometimes, but it has to, it even has some on-device recognition there that integrates with its stuff. But I think devices that are adding that, it just makes them faster at picking stuff up, because the image doesn't have to go up to the cloud to get recognized. It can get recognized, at least in part, on the device before it goes to the cloud for maybe more image recognition, or from a privacy first standpoint like Apple, it's analyzed in the home. But even with HomeKit Secure Video, it's going from the camera to your home hub and then getting analyzed there. And the processor on your Apple TV or your HomePod aren't necessarily processors optimized for machine learning image recognition. Maybe the Apple TV one is to a point because it's an older iPhone processor. But the Apple Watch processor in your full-size HomePod is not really that kind of thing. I mean, it still has ML, Core ML, TPUs, I guess you could, not TPU, not that's Google's term, but like it still has machine learning cores in those CPUs. But I just think that having silicon that's built to detect images, put inside of these cameras to run at low power is going to be a big thing going forward. And I hope to see more companies go in that direction. We'll see. And I think it'll be another area where I think HomeKit Secure Videos, I'm not usually pro HomeKit Secure Video these days. And I think that's another reason is that I don't see that being something that Apple and its partners will be able to pull off very well, with Apple writing the software and the the hardware makers writing, making the hardware and the firmware to run on the device. Because Apple, at least at this point, doesn't let those companies make the recognition of there's a person. That's all done by Apple. So we'll see. Maybe Apple will evolve that over time, but that's sort of one of my concerns as well about HomeKit Secure Videos. I don't see it being able to take advantage of some of these more potentially modern things. So then there was something else I wanted to get to in the chat here. The U300 question there. This is a good question, Keenan. Looking to get into Aara. Would you recommend it for new users? I'm very interested in their U300 lock. Sorry, taking a quick sip of water there. I have not played with the U300 myself. But I've seen it at CES. It looks very cool. It's nice to have a smart home, potentially home key lock that works with a lock that's not a deadbolt. So where the lock is on the handle. There's like a proper home builder term for that, but I can't remember what it was. Yeah, I mean, I think Aara has some good stuff. I would say though, fresh off the pain of having all of my Aara stuff that's attached to my hubs turned upside down by going from M2 to M3, I would personally look more at some of their Matter over Thread stuff and potentially adding it directly into Apple Home. It might be easier than going with an Aara hub, but that said, I think the most compelling value that Aara has for a lot of people I know are the leak sensors. And so, yeah, I mean, I think you can get an M2 hub and a handful of their leak sensors and put those around your home, under sinks, by the, let's say the hot water heater, maybe, a few places where you think pipes might be at risk of freezing if you live in a cold area. And you can go ahead and put those around and then get alerts. And I have those then added through the, something like the M2 hub into Apple Home. And I mean, or maybe the M3 hub, as we talked about earlier, if you're into the advanced tech there. But I think, yeah, the leak sensors are a really clever and simple thing from Aara that you can do a lot with. And it's not in the end going to cost you that much money in the grand scheme of things compared to other smart home investments. You could spend, let's say, like $120, $140 and get an M2 hub and a bunch of leak sensors and have something that's pretty handy. And then of course I'd say, so that's one like most valuable thing that Aara can do. The next thing would be, some of their cameras are still pretty good. I think maybe TP-Link might edge them out in terms of indoor HomeKit cameras right now. The C125, I think it is, that I reviewed on my channel. Let me pull up the specific video I'm talking about, so you know what I'm talking about. That camera might be better indoor HomeKit camera. This one. So This video, the C125 is probably a better home video camera. But going back to other things from Aara, of course, the locks are good, and I would say keep an eye on like the U300 lock and other things with Aara locks. There are also a lot of other great smart locks on the market or coming this year, so it's a space to watch. And by the time the U300 is available, I think we'll have a lot better sense of like what other options there are out there. The last thing that can be really handy from Aara are their light switches. In the US, there are few to no companies, especially with Apple Home. I don't know of any others with Apple Home that have dual paddle switches that also work with no neutral wire. So that can be really nice, especially if you live in a smaller or older home, to find light switches that support that kind of wiring can be very nice. And they're going to be less expensive than Lutron. I would still choose Lutron provided my wiring can support it, which is a lot of homes, but there can be some, like there's some unique situations, like let's say my twins' room, where the wiring doesn't, it wouldn't support a Lutron light switch. It's dual paddle, so you need to have two light switches there. And so the top one is you press to toggle it on and off, and the bottom one you press to toggle it on and off. And that's something that Lutron doesn't offer. So that's what I use. I use an Aara switch in there. And I think they sent that one to me. I know I bought one and then they sent me another. So yeah, I would say those are sort of my buyer's guide to Aara. Start with something like the M2 Hub, unless you really feel like you need the M3 Hub. Look at their leak sensors, and then also, then look at things like their cameras and their light switches. Now, the other thing too with Aara is, as I mentioned, their matter over thread stuff I found to be pretty good. Their motion sensor and their door sensors. So that could be something to get into as well, although those tend to be a little bit more expensive than their Zigbee ones. So if you're buying a bunch of them, maybe you could just save some money, put them all into your hub by buying the Zigbee versions. I don't think those are going away anytime soon. The other side of this too, the cool product that Aara has is their presence sensor. It's not always quite as lightning fast as a motion sensor, I think, just because of the inherent technology. And it takes some getting used to, getting like trial and error to get the presence sensor to work exactly how you want it to in your space. But once you do, it's really cool. And you can do all kinds of crazy, cool automations with their presence sensor. The other cool thing about their presence sensor, as far as getting into Aara, it doesn't need the hub as well. So it's just a device you set up and connect to your Wi-Fi. So the millimeter wave sensor is very cool. So yeah, long answer on that one, but a lot to talk about, especially in light of this week we're having a video on Aara. So let's see. Yeah, the iPad mini is a nice size for universal control. Although, here goes my sub pump. You probably hear that. As the iPad Pros and then the iPad Airs and other iPads in the line get lighter and lighter, I kind of feel like, those are only but so much bigger and are still like a good iPad. I've held the mini, I have a mini upstairs. Like I know what you mean by the size. It feels really nice in the hand. It is very easy to use in portrait, but I wonder at this point to buy a new mini, you're buying such old technology, brand new, wouldn't really make sense to me. Now, the fact that they dropped the base model iPad down $100 to sort of get rid of the old version of the iPad, and now that sort of entry-level iPad is $350, I think that's a pretty compelling option, especially when you're looking at smart home controls. If you're buying an iPad just to use to control your smart home, which some people do, I would look at that one, to be honest. Their batteries, Aara batteries, last longer than anyone else, but as I mentioned in my motion sensor review, Saul, changing their batteries for a lot of their sensors is a real pain. It's like, very inexpensive plastic on there that's like hard to open. And then, it depends on which sensor you're talking about. But, usually the battery lasts so long that you don't have to worry about it that much. But it is annoying. And I think other companies have made, like Eve's sensors are generally a little bit better, I think, to change the batteries on. But they, of course, cost more. And I find that the battery life maybe not as good. I haven't done any like complete scientific comparison, so it's not fair for me to claim Eve or Aara has better or worse battery life, but because it'd be a hard comparison to do over like months. But yeah, that is an advantage of Aara, but also like a downside of their sensors, that sometimes changing the battery on some of their, like the door sensors and the motion sensors is tough. Okay, cool. So you're using Home Dash, George, it sounds like, to make a home dashboard. That's cool. Let's see. Going through the chat here. Wait, John, are we talking about the same thing? Because I think you might be talking about the Aara U00. Because the Aara U00, I think, is their only smart lock that's out right now. You're mentioning U300, and the U300 is their new. Let's see if this works. No. The U300 is their new lock that has not come out yet. So that's the one that works on. See, this is all they sell right now, but they announced at CES a U300, and that's sort of the new lock that's coming out. I have not really played too much with the U100 myself for a long set of reasons that it's not worth it getting into right now. But it seems like a great product. I know other people have raved about it. So, and The Verge recommends it. So I'm sure the U100 is great. But I would say, we'll see. I think the smart lock space, unless you desperately need a lock today, you're probably going to make a way more informed decision if you wait like a month or two. Yale just had a new home key lock come out. Whoops. Where was I on that? Let me pull this up. It's not super recent, but I don't think. Yeah, the Assure Lock 2 Plus. So this is the new one from Yale, but definitely more expensive than the U300. So we'll see. A lot of things going on in the smart lock space this year. Now let's go back to maybe some other questions. I think we'll wind this down pretty soon. Oh, hey, happy Friday, Shane. No, never too late. Fashionably late, Shane. Nice to see you here. Good to have you on the live stream. If you don't know about Shane, he's a content creator, YouTuber making videos about Apple and smart home tech. You should check him out if you haven't already. Let's see. Yeah, it's a good point. With Aara, if you're buying into Aara products, keep an eye out for various, Prime Day or Black Friday or whatever sales. They often do a lot of promotions around then. And especially if you're buying either bigger ticket items or want to buy 10 door sensors, you can save some money then. Yeah, okay, cool, John. We were talking about the same thing. The U100 then. Let's see. Home Dash. Yeah, a lot of you guys are talking about Home Dash. Maybe you're going to make me set up another iPad dashboard in my home, which I don't know if I want to do. I've felt like it's more, I don't know, just not something I'm into, but this does look like a pretty cool app, pretty cool way to customize it. I know there are a handful of different apps and tools out there that give you options to make your own dashboard. And I do think, as I've talked about briefly in other times, I do think that for me, my favorite way to use a smart home isn't necessarily as much, although it is useful. I do use sensors, but isn't as much to use like a motion sensor or a door sensor to always have your lights automatically coming on or off or things like that. It's to use buttons or other forms of control, whether that maybe it's a widget on your Mac desktop or something else, to set a scene. And you can also, with HomeKit buttons, do all kinds of conditional automations. Then you could say, well, if I touch this button before this time of day, then do this. Because, back to people talk about this when they talk about why maybe the Vision Pro isn't caught on or other tech products, and why the iPhone was so successful. It's like the iPhone latched onto this idea that people already had as a habit in their lives, which was to use a cell phone. Cell phones were already a thing when the iPhone came out, and the iPhone just made that whole experience so much better. People already go to the wall to hit their light switch, and so if you just add an additional button there that adds some more functionality, then it's much easier for more people in your lives to understand and get behind and see benefit from when they touch that button, and way more than just the lights turn on or off or something like that. That's way more smart. And I'm not the only person to talk about this. I know, Shane, you had a video a long time ago about how your wife loves flick buttons. So it's but I'm loving more and more as time goes on that side of smart home tech, where it's like you hit a button or you have some kind of shortcut somewhere that then triggers a bunch of things in your smart home. And that I think is really the value that a lot of people can get from smart home tech. And I think it's also more attainable than having to set up all these different automation things with sensors where you're maybe having to do some more sort of not programming, but sort of that kind of thinking up front. So we're winding down here. Let's see. Some good conversation in the chat here. Yes. All right. So I think we've kind of come to the close of our live stream for today. Thanks so much for joining. And if you haven't already, check out the Aara M3 video. And I have a lot of other exciting videos in production. May is an exciting month, and it's starting to be the, start of a lot of other releases and news and stuff happening over the rest of the year for Apple Home and smart home tech. And I look forward to seeing you guys again next week. I think we'll try it at this new time, starting at 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern. We'll see how that works. I didn't see as many folks from Europe on today, so maybe it's just a little bit too late for some of those guys over in some of those folks over in Europe. But anyways, we'll see. But let's plan on next week, same time, same place. Thanks so much for watching, and hope to see you in the next video. Bye.